Howdy, it's Kyle talking about New Mexico. I've been posting videos for a little while here on YouTube and been talking about this and that in terms of geography, but in this video, I wanted to go over why, after all my years of traveling and studying the US, New Mexico is my favorite state in the entire country. You might be a little surprised to hear me say that, being that New Mexico isn't exactly the most popular state to hear people say is their favorite, but I wanted to talk about some of the unique aspects of the culture and physical geography that leads it to be my favorite state, and to why I'd like to live there someday. First, I wanted to go over a few basics of the state. It's the fifth largest state in the country in terms of area. Only Alaska, Texas, California, and Montana are larger. It's 36th in population with about 2.1 million people. It's well ahead of number 37 Nebraska and well behind 35 Nevada, so it's going to be 36 for a long time. It was the 47th state to be admitted to the Union, with only Arizona, Alaska, and Hawaii being admitted afterwards. So it was a territory for quite a long time. It's only been a state for a little over 100 years. First, I want to talk about some of the aspects of the physical geography of the state that I love so much, and I'm going to first start talking about the climate. And if you've seen some of my other videos, you know that I hate humidity and really cold temperatures, so New Mexico has neither one of those, so it's off to a great start. I also don't like the really high temperatures of the low desert like you get in southeastern California or southwestern Arizona, and so people that know New Mexico know that it's a desert state, but it's mostly higher elevation, so the temperatures don't get anywhere near as high as you're going to get, in the Colorado River area. And yeah, it can get pretty hot there in the summertime. Temperatures in the 90s are pretty common, and it can hit the hundreds as well. But it's that classic dry heat, and because it is a higher elevation, summers don't last anywhere near as long as they are in Arizona. And in the northern part of the state, at some of the higher elevations above 10,000 feet, it can get really, really cold with a decent amount of snow, but nobody really lives up there. So it's great for going up to visit the mountains in the snow, but not having to live there. It's similar to how when I was growing up in Central California, about a half an hour away from the entrance to Sequoia National Park, it'd be nice and mild on the valley floor during the wintertime, but then we'd be like, all right, we're going to go up to the snow to go play. And that's what we would say. We'd be going up to the snow. So we'd go into the national park with our sleds, go playing up on the hills, sliding down the hills, but then come back to the valley floor where it's nice and mild. We don't have to actually live in those cold temperatures with all the snow. And for a lot of New Mexico, it's pretty much the same thing. You can go up to the higher elevations, go skiing, go play in the snow, but then come back down to lower elevations where you actually live, where it's not that terribly cold. In terms of the physical landscape, with it being a western state, there are going to be a lot of really high mountains there. You have the southern end of the Rocky Mountains. You have a lot of national forests there and other nice natural areas, and you have a lot of caves going on there as well. So it's a very pretty state, although it doesn't have the same spectacular scenery like you might find in some of the other western states like Utah, Wyoming, or Colorado, or like the Sierra Nevada or the Cascades, but it is still a very pretty state. In the north central part of the state, you're in the Rocky Mountains, and you get some pretty high elevations there, and you have many peaks that are over 11,000 feet, so it's not quite the same as all the 14ers you get in Colorado and other parts of the country, but the highest point in the state is Wheeler Peak at over 13,000 feet, so there are some pretty high elevations there. In the northwest part of the state is when you're in the Colorado Plateau area, so you're near the Four Corners Point, and this is where you have a lot of the formations that you're going to see in northeastern Arizona, kind of like the Monument Valley area with some mesas and buttes, and it's very pretty. It's also kind of sparse, so it isn't quite as exciting as southeastern Utah or northeastern Arizona, but it's still very pretty in the northwestern part of the state. In the west central part of the state, near the Arizona border, you have some mountains there as well. They're more desert-type mountains, and the elevations aren't as high. Nothing is above 11,000 feet, but you have several peaks above 10,000, and it's just a very pretty area. It's just very subtle beauty. So a lot of folks wouldn't think it's gorgeous scenery. I think it is, but there are very few people that live there. It's almost entirely wilderness, and I love it. In the southwestern part of the state, you have a lot of very pretty mountains as well. The Organ Mountains National Monument is beautiful. It's got some nice hiking trails there, and it's just extreme wilderness. And with it being so far south, it doesn't get that cold during the wintertime, and with it being higher elevation, it doesn't get that hot during the summertime. So it's pretty nice to visit year-round, and it's just super wilderness with nobody living there, which I like, but it's also pretty close to other cities. So you can get to Las Cruces very easily, or if you want to do some bigger city kind of stuff, you can get to El Paso, Texas very easily. So I like that. You can have mild temperatures, pretty scenery, you're out in the wilderness, but you are close to cities if you want to do city kind of stuff. In the southeastern part of the state is where you have White Sands National Monument. And this is a very well-known spot. You've probably seen pictures of it a million times. It's just a bunch of white sand dunes, and it's a great place to visit, but you're not going to really be able to do very much there. You might walk around the dunes for a few hours. It's kind of cool, but it is something that's really neat to see, but you're not going to spend that much time there. But what I really like about the southeastern part of the state is all the caves, and there's so much karst in the southeastern part of New Mexico. And karst is the term for an area with a lot of limestone, a lot of erosion that leads to the formation of caves. And Carlsbad Caverns National Park is a very well-known cave in the far southeastern corner of the state. It's beautiful. It's somewhere you should definitely visit if you get a chance. If you're doing a road trip across the country, Carlsbad is definitely not going to be along your route, but I think it is worth going out of the way to see it. There's just this huge snaking trail that goes down into the cave that kind of switch backs and forth for like a mile. It seems like I'm going to go down there forever. You get down there, it's just called the big room, and it is an enormous room. I've been in a bunch of caves, and the room is enormous. So it's a very pretty cave. You can do the regular walking tour, self-guided through the big room, or you can do the more adventurous wild cave tours with the helmets and lights and knee pads and things. That's, of course, what I would like to do. But, Carlsbad is where the people go to visit the cave for the most part, but there are so many other caves in the southeastern part of the state. So if you're a caver or you're with the National Speleological Society, you can get access to other caves and just go caving in wild natural caves. So I just love caving. I love caves. But of course, where I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee is the top caving area in the entire world. But southeast New Mexico is also very nice for the caving. In the northeastern part of the state is where you have the least spectacular scenery. And so if you're driving along the state along I-40 and you're coming from Texas, your first experience of New Mexico is going to be the I-40 corridor. So it's going to be pretty boring, bland, very brown, and you'll be like, what? I thought the West was beautiful. What is this? This is hideous. But that really is the ugliest part of the state, the I-40 corridor in the eastern half of the state. So other than that, the state is very, very pretty, even though it isn't the northeastern part of the state that makes it that way. So that's the physical geography of the state and some of the aspects that I like so much, but that's not the only reason why I love the state so much. It's also the cultural aspects, and I want to talk about those. Like I mentioned before, there are about 2.1 million people in the entire state, but it isn't all evenly distributed throughout the entire state. Albuquerque and Santa Fe are about an hour apart from each other, and it's pretty much entirely suburbs between the two, and about 1.3 million of the 2.1 million live just in those two cities in that metropolitan area. Albuquerque is the largest city in the state with a population approaching 600,000, and the metropolitan area is approaching 1 million. So it's a pretty big city, pretty decent sized metropolitan area, and it's one of my favorite medium-sized cities in the country. For me, it has that Goldilocks size to where it's big enough to have all the major cultural aspects you expect from a big city, but not so large to where you're going to be stuck in traffic for an hour trying to go 3 miles. But, there are some big city issues there. There's some problems with crime and gangs and stuff, but that's not unique to Albuquerque. Every single city in the country has that. So I like the size of it. It's big enough, but not too big. And, I wouldn't want to live right in Albuquerque, but it would be a nice city for me to live pretty close to get to for doing big city kind of stuff. Santa Fe is about an hour north of Albuquerque along I-25, and it's the capital of the state. There are about 300,000 people or so in the Santa Fe area, and it's my favorite city in this size range in the entire country. I also love the history of the city. It's the second oldest city in the country. Only St. Augustine, Florida is older, and the square downtown is really old, really historic, and you can look at old pictures and old paintings of the square. It looks the exact same as it does today. I love walking around the square. I love the history. I love the shopping and vendors and restaurants and the art galleries. And it's very touristy, a lot of tourists there. So if you live in Santa Fe, you're probably not going down to the square every single day, but it is something that's nice to have nearby. So if, say, you live in Charleston, South Carolina, you're not going down to the Battery every day, but you are going down there every once in a while. So it is nice to have that kind of area that's old and historic, kind of touristy, but it's touristy for a reason. It's just really cool. Although culturally different, it is kind of a similar layout to Asheville, North Carolina, with the city in the mountains about the same size. You have a lot of art galleries. It's kind of an artist mecca for the southeastern U.S. So Santa Fe is kind of the same thing for the western U.S. It's about the same size. You're in the mountains, pretty touristy, a lot of artists, pretty funky vibe. It's also where you have Roswell, and this is where you had something weird happen in 1947 with aliens maybe. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but something happened there that was really weird. So they really play up the whole alien thing there. It's kind of cheesy, really, but it is also pretty interesting that, something really did happen there. I don't know if it was aliens, but something. You also have some ancient Pueblo and Indian ruins there that are over 1,000 years old in the Chaco Culture Historic Site. You have also very old sites in Taos, and just the whole northern part of the state has a lot of really old ancient Indian history. And I am not going to do a video about New Mexico without talking about the food. I love it. It is fantastic. And it's not Mexican. It's not Tex-Mex. It's New Mexican. It's a different type of cuisine. It's similar in many ways, but it's also got a very unique take on it. I love spicy food, and everything is just a little bit spicier in New Mexico than anywhere else in the country. So if you're used to hot foods, you might want to order a heat level down from what you're used to. So if you're normally ordering hot wherever you go, consider medium in New Mexico. If you like extra hot normally, consider just regular hot in New Mexico, because it is very, very spicy. So I remember my friend and I, we were there and we both love really hot wings, and we ordered extra hot. We both thought we were going to die because it was just way hotter than what we're usually expecting with extra hot. So it's proudly the chili capital of the world. You know, their state question is red or green, meaning what kind of chili do you like on your dish. So I love the food. I love the spiciness. It's really unique. Check it out sometime. It's a great cuisine. And what makes New Mexico's culture so unique is that other than Hawaii, it's the most multicultural state in the country. So it's got equal influence culturally from the indigenous population, Hispanic population, and the Anglo population. So, you know, even though the population of the state isn't exactly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, the input into the culture is about 1/3 each. So it gives a very unique aspect. It's not quite white, it's not quite Mexican, it's not quite Navajo, it's New Mexico. In terms of the racial and ethnic makeup of the state, it's a majority-minority state. 46% of the population is Hispanic, almost entirely Mexican, and 9% of the population is indigenous, primarily Navajo. So 55% of the population is not white, and only 37% of the population is white alone, which is kind of like my racial ethnic makeup. And, you know, I look super white, but I have a lot of Hispanic and indigenous in me. So I know I like the mix of the cultures. It just makes for a very unique place. And only 64% of the population speaks English only. That probably has got to be the lowest of any state, to where less than 2/3 of the people only speak English. There's a lot of Spanish speakers there and a lot of Navajo speakers there as well. Everything officially done by the government is going to be done in both English and Spanish, so it's a bilingual state. And other than Hawaii, there are no other bilingual states. Not even California is a bilingual state, so it's very unique in that regard. And you have so many people that speak Spanish only, but you also have a lot of Navajo speakers as well. So you have a lot of things that are printed up in Navajo, a lot of official documents. So it's almost like a trilingual state in many ways. So just again, points to that, you know, multicultural aspect of the state. And a large part of the Spanish-speaking population is a unique dialect of Spanish, simply called New Mexican Spanish, because you have a large population of people that have been there for a very long time. These aren't recent immigrants from Mexico. These are people that have been there for hundreds of years. So their Spanish is a little bit different and also quite unique. Something else that's very unique about the state is that it's the only state in the country that has USA on its license plate. So it has to say New Mexico, USA, because of the sad reality is that so few Americans know much about the geography of the country. It's often a forgotten state. And there have been many stories of people showing a New Mexico driver's license somewhere in the US, and people say, oh, we can't take international driver's license. And this happens a lot. So this is a story you hear anecdotally from a lot of New Mexicans that have been other places, and people don't realize New Mexico is a state. It's like, what are you talking about here? So, you know, you ask people, what are the four corner states? Well, it's Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and Wyoming. That's the other one. So I don't know why. To me, it seems like it'd be an obvious one to remember, being that it's New Mexico, but I don't know. It's often a very forgotten state. So it's kind of funny that it says USA on the license plate, and people often have to show that, no, we're actually Americans. New Mexico isn't a country, and it's not part of Mexico. So I love the state so much. Does that mean other people like it? Well, I think a lot of people do. I think it's kind of a love it or hate it kind of state. And, you know, the population is growing. It's not one of the fastest growing states in the country. It's above average in terms of population growth. I think it's about 17th right now in terms of overall growth. So people are moving there, but it isn't on fuego like, you know, the Carolinas or Georgia or Texas or Washington that are growing like crazy. So it's growing, just not anywhere near as much, which is something else I like about it. But the picture isn't entirely rosy. There are plenty of issues going on in the state, and it's by no means a perfect state. So I want to go over some of the negative aspects of the state because I don't want this video to be completely biased. It consistently ranks as the poorest state in the country outside of the Southeast. And when you think of poverty, you think of the Southeast first. And the only states in the country that are poorer than New Mexico are West Virginia, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Kentucky. And you expect those guys to be at the bottom of the list, but New Mexico might be a little bit surprising to see ranked at the bottom in terms of poverty and income and those types of economic indicators. And it's largely due to the indigenous population having been subjugated through, is that the right word? Hold on a second. subjugated through the years, and so the economic standing of the Native American population, primarily Navajo, is pretty low. So one of the poorest parts of the entire country is the northwestern corner of the state, where you have the largest indigenous population in the state. So that's just a quick overview of the state, why I love it so much, and why it's my favorite state in the country. So you have that mild climate where it doesn't get extremely hot or extremely cold. You don't have a ton of snow. There's no humidity. Very limited natural disasters. The culture is very unique, very multicultural, mixed from different ethnicities, a lot of history, and wonderful food. So yeah, New Mexico, my favorite state. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and take a chance, subscribe to this channel. I don't post that many videos, so I'm not going to be spamming your inbox. So if you're interested in stuff about U.S. geography and physical and cultural aspects and ranking things and just things about travel and road tripping across the U.S., and that's what this channel is. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King signing out.